Hello everyone and welcome back to the Blue Then Bright Talk channel. So today we're going to be talking about identity resolution, what it is and how it can enable omnichannel marketing. So we've got a great turnout today. I can see lots of new names, which is fantastic. So big thank you for joining us. The session should last about 30 minutes or so. Presenting the content today, we've got consultant from Blue Then, Matt Diamond. Thanks very much for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Jen. Hi, everyone.
So I'm just here to look at some housekeeping bits, keep a note if anyone asks any questions, although we will probably be answering them offline today, so we've only got about 30 minutes. So if you're ready, Matt, I'll pass over to you and we can jump in.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jen. Like I said, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think to start then, well, today's session, we're going to be covering quite a lot of topics around identity resolution. And before we dig into each of those in turn, I kind of really wanted to take a step back for a moment and just explore a bit of a real-life scenario with everyone on the session today. So I'm sure many of us have, we've all sort of been to parties, different social events, obviously not quite so many with everything that's going on at the moment, especially in person, but it's all these different places where we've met lots of different and interesting people, really. And I'm sure that we've all been to these events, and everyone who will have remembered different people in different levels of clarity. Some will have remembered really clearly, maybe you had a really inspiring conversation with them, or you bonded over a shared love of something or other that you were talking about. But I almost guarantee that every one of these events that you went to, there are people, or at least one person that you forgot, because none of us have got absolutely perfect memories, right? But if we fast forward to the next time that you attend a function, event, party, whatever you want to call it, what happens when you bump into that person that you've forgotten, in inverted commas? You know them from somewhere. You're kind of there going, well, actually, who is this person? You just can't quite place them. But if we just pause and actually invert that situation, what happens if you're the person that's been forgotten? How do you feel if you remember someone and they immediately address you, but they do it with the wrong name? They ask after your kids using their names, except they're not your kids. You don't have kids. They're asking about your job, but it's the wrong job. You don't work for that company. And this scenario really, and others like it, this is what we subject our customers to as brands when we can't personalize our brand experience. And that can take many different forms, from things like inaccurate product recommendations to using the wrong name when you're suggesting that people sign into the app or sign into their account on the website. It really is, it's the impact of all of these personalized experiences, the positive and the negative, that directly correlate to our brand's overall customer experience. But really then, how has that need for those personalised levels of experience changed over time? Well, we all live in this modern hyper-connected world where the demand for those personalised engagements and experiences has risen exponentially. And a lot of this is demonstrated by the fact that 62% of customers they'll punish brands. They will take some kind of action against a brand for irrelevant or inaccurate communications. And if we break that 62% down, this really boils down to two sort of key numbers. 48% of those customers will unsubscribe from brand communications, for example, but it's the further 14% who cease to trade with a brand or cease to engage with that brand at all that we're really concerned about. Now, I'll be really honest here, while 14% doesn't actually seem that high a statistic when taken in isolation, I just want you to take a moment and just think about what would your business and the overall business's bottom line actually look like if, let's say, that top 14% was your top 14% of customers and they stopped buying from you as an organisation. So how, realistically then, how can we actually sort of start to look at these personalised experiences and how they're related to identity resolution? And how do brands actually avoid these kinds of sort of negative customer reactions to our behaviours? Well, if we take a look at Forrester's definition that we can see on screen here of identity resolution, we can see that this entire definition is geared around that accurate customer profile, how it's created, and how it underpins our specific use cases for our business, whether that's personalization, whether that's the broader brand experience, whether that's analysis, whether that's orchestration. But then this brings up a further question then. How do we actually resolve these identities? If this is so key, how do we do this? Well, if we've only got a couple of data points, got a couple of customers just in isolation, we could quite easily manage all of this in Excel, for example. We could take all of our data, we could use our empirical knowledge and our pattern recognition skills as marketers to establish all the links between the different data points and come to those resolved identities. Now, I know the idea of manual data manipulation spreadsheets is probably filling quite a few of you with dread on the webinar today, and I'll be honest, it's not something I'm going to advocate as an identity resolution approach, so no need to worry. But it really does illustrate the concept of this. All we're trying to do is to link multiple data points together to allow us to understand the device or the person that those data points relate to. And I really want to highlight here that there is a distinction between device and person, and that distinction is actually really important. But I'm going to come back to that a little later on, so I'd like you to, if you can, just keep that in the back of your mind. But putting device and person level aside, I think many of you will probably already have spotted the issue here. Go back to the idea of Excel. How does this identity resolution approach scale when we're talking about hundreds of thousands or even millions of customers and hundreds of millions, potentially even billions of different data points? Many organizations are looking to answer this exact question. And this is where we see technology helping to provide the answers, whether that's in the form of identity graphs that you can buy from different providers, whether that's in the form of things like CDPs or other data management solutions like DMPs, for example. But before we consider the role of each of those different solutions in a little bit more detail, I want to talk about the benefits of identity resolution and the possibilities it really opens up for marketers when it's done correctly. When I say correctly, what I mean by that is it's done in a reliable, trustworthy, compliant, and accurate way. Just going down this list then, really we're talking about not just improved database management, it's about being able to improve the fundamental foundation for all of the business decisions because we have all of that clean data. It's all about removing the risk associated with that data management, engaging and making sure that we're compliant at all points as well. And then being able to actually link together all of the online and offline activities and all of those different data points. And again, that's then going to feed forward into enabling cross-device linking and then all of that cross-device attribution to also take place as well, because we can link everything back to the individual customer, the individual prospect. And because we have those links, we can then actually enhance our targeting and our segmentation. We can be more accurate and with our personalization. And then we can be a lot more timely and a lot more relevant than ever before, because we understand who we're talking to and what they're interested in. So when we do talk about identity resolution, then we need to consider not only the use cases, but the types of data that we can use. Not necessarily the minutiae of each individual data point that we might be collecting, but broadly speaking, what type of data is it? First party, second party, third party. And I say this because each of them has a different part to play in identity resolution, but there's a trade-off to be made as well. So if we start by taking a look at first-party data then, this is our data as marketers. We own this. It's essentially free to us as a business. And it's the most accurate data that we'll get hold of. And it really is the cornerstone of all of our knowledge around our customer base. And by being first-party and being able to use that first-party data, we can really manage things like personalization, messaging, offers, and we can do this in the most accurate way. We can communicate with people on that one-to-one basis using the best channels for communicating with those individual customers while really respecting their preferences and, like I said, managing our own legal compliance as well. But at the other end of the spectrum, we also have third-party data. And in the context of identity resolution, this is all about broadening our reach. It's about providing reach and really allowing us to connect with new customers and doing that through their devices. But the issue here is that third-party data tends to involve a larger margin for error. We're not necessarily linking the data using PII or personally identifiable information because we're not, a lot of people don't have that kind of information that's public. We have to be aware of that, and we then have to acknowledge that there's a lower accuracy level when we're using third-party data, and balance the trade-off when we're talking about identity resolution between reaching new customers and any negative impacts that might have on the brand experience. I think it's also worth saying here, there's a lot of evidence that many companies and brands are looking at making a pivot away from really, really heavy reliance on third-party data. They're still using it, but it's not the absolute be-all and end-all. This is partly to do with accuracy, but it's also to do with the new wave of data compliance legislation that's emerged over the last few years. Yes, I am talking about GDPR and CCPA and all of the other pieces of legislation that are currently being assessed as well. But also this pivot is about competitive advantage. It's about helping to really combat the threat that sort of data-rich players, in different sectors have. Just think about Amazon's a great example. Think about how they leverage what they know about each and every one of us as customers and how they personalize compared to potentially how you do it or other organizations that you buy from will personalize as well. But that aside, we also have a third source of data here. We have something in the middle. We have second-party data. Essentially, it's another organization's first-party data that they can legally sell on. And in many ways, it has all of the benefits of first-party data, the accuracy, the granularity, etc. It does give you a level of expanded reach, not going to be as much as third-party, for example, but it is going to give you more than if you were just working with first-party data. The only difference being here, as you can see, there's a cost to it, as well as there is to third-party. And for some businesses, that's not something to worry about, whereas others, that's not necessarily a feasible route to really explore. So now we understand a little bit about the data types. How do we actually bring those different data types together? What processes, what approaches can we use to do this? So when we're talking about actually matching data, broadly speaking, there are two matching types that we're going to look at, probabilistic and deterministic. So if we think about probabilistic matching first then, this is where we're using probability, as the name suggests. We're doing this in the form of predictive algorithms, machine learning, and statistical modeling. And we're trying to work out from observations and behaviors and from all of these different probabilistic approaches, how all the data points connect to one another. But if we contrast this with deterministic matching, this, again, as the name suggests, is really about being able to determine links between the data and being able to really focus on accuracy rather than having to resort to probabilities and margins for error. Now, I want to just take a quick pause here as well before anyone actually puts this into the chat as well. This is something that where it normally comes up is, well, which of these is the best approach? Every time we talk about matching rules, myself, anyone else we work with, this is always the thing that comes up. And I just want to sort of pause that question and say, well, actually, they both have their pros and cons and their place within identity resolution as a whole. And I just want to sort of run through that for a moment before we look into anything else. So when we think about probabilistic matching, this is great if you give yourself, reach is the sort of the big thing that you're looking to gain. In exactly the same way as we spoke about with third-party data, you've got to be comfortable with a lower level of accuracy because it's based on probability, not fact. So broadly speaking then, when the benefits of that reach, being able to connect with absolutely everyone that you can, outweigh the need for precision, then probabilistically matched data is probably actually the best way to go. And broadly speaking then, this is also the reason that advertising and a lot of other device level optimization and those different device level optimization strategies tend to leverage a lot more probabilistically matched data. Probably a lot of that is also going to be third-party data as well. But if we contrast that with deterministic matching, this is going to be the best approach for you if you're looking to really obtain maximum accuracy. And you have access to all of the right data points as well. You're collecting all of that personally identifiable information. And I say this really as it's not just certain solutions like identity graphs that can match in this way. CDPs can also do this as well. And there are many other solutions which use deterministic matching. Like I said, they rely on that personally identifiable information to really aid that matching process. And this ensures that devices and all of the other elements of the profile are linked together using that PII, and you have that absolutely determined match. So in summary then, probabilistic matching is all about scale, whereas deterministic matching is all about accuracy. But rather than thinking of them really as, well, one's better than the other, we need to really sort of look at the context of them in terms of identity resolution and actually how they work together as a whole as well. So we've been talking a little bit so far about resolving identities. And one of the most popular ways to do this is through the use of an identity graph. That's something I'm sure many of you on the session today will have heard about. But before we touch upon how an identity graph is brought together and a couple of the key things to sort of think about, what actually is an identity graph? Well, I'll be really honest, there are many different variations on the specific wording. But broadly speaking, identity graph is a database. It links together all of the different identifiers that are associated with a device or a person with the aim of creating a single resolved identity for that device or for that person. So just think back to all of the different matching approaches we've just been talking through and the different data points that we've just been talking through as well. It's how you mix those together as a whole that will inform how that identity graph is created. But not only that as well, you've also got to think about a couple of other things that identity graph creation is based on. What data is actually made available as well, and how is that data going to be matched to two of them? But also, how big is the device cloud that's associated with the identity graph? Now, this really is a key topic, especially if you're looking at leveraging an element of third-party data, as the broader the device cloud, the higher the number of identifiers and behaviors that you have access to that are being collected from right across the digital ecosystem. So obviously, at that point, the more data you'll have, the greater your reach will be, but also the greater your accuracy will be because you've just got more data to be playing with. This is really all about ensuring the longevity of the identity graph and in turn your actual identity management approach, especially when related to third-party data as well. So the other sort of key area to really consider here then is the idea of public versus private. So again, speaking in broader terms, public identity graphs are built using publicly available data, which is going to be by definition mainly third-party data, things that are out there in the public domain. Whereas a private identity graph is going to be built by marketers using the data that they own. So that's typically using that PII and all of that first-party data that you already have access to as a business as well. So if we compare the two types of identity graph then, public graphs are, again, really good at allowing you to gain that reach and coverage, but then you've got that higher level of inaccuracy to think about. Whereas a private graph will give you more control over the data and the approach used to link the data points together, as well as that higher degree of accuracy. And speaking historically, many organizations really have emphasized the reach element of identity resolution and the different approaches they're using. How many data points was the approach or the graph collecting? How many sites was the cookies that they're using the presence on? And it's this focus combined with historically readily available sources of third-party data has really led to organizations focusing on scale rather than accuracy when looking at identity resolution. And it's something which becomes even more evident when we consider things such as the device versus person debate. And especially in the realm of advertising and all of the key sort of advertising metrics and goals and the different measurement methodologies, things like impressions and everything else as well. So as you can see then, it's not simply as simple as saying, well, I want the most accurate identity resolution approach, because every business absolutely wants that. We need to take into account all of the other factors like how much reach do we need to have, what data do we have available, what are the acceptable error margins that we're happy to work within, and what are the business goals that we have, and how all of these will come together to actually influence our approach. But before we look at these considerations a little further, I just want to take a 2-minute detour to address something that I'm sure many of you will be thinking about, especially with all this mention of third-party data, public identity graphs. What role do cookies play in creating an identity graph and actually aiding identity resolution? Now, as I've already mentioned, many public identity graphs are based upon cookies and other publicly available identifiers that are collected from lots of different websites. Now, due to many major tech players, when we start to think about Apple, Google's recent announcements, as well as some of the things that Facebook are doing, all of these companies are deprecating their support for third-party cookies, especially in relation to tracking and targeting. And there are many industry analysts out there and different experts who are seeing this as the real sort of impending collapse or the marginalization of third-party data and third-party cookies as a key part of the digital marketing and digital advertising ecosystem. And it's this move by these major players that has led to brands adopting a more person-centric approach to identity resolution, really leveraging their own data assets, sacrificing reach that's been given to them through third-party data, and then actually using identity resolution to improve their accuracy, being able to actually meet customers' expectations. And this is all about the battleground is changing from how many people can you talk to how accurately can you talk to them and how much do you know about them as well. So speaking of customer expectations then, I've kind of got a question for everyone on the session today. What do you care more about as a marketer? Do you care more about the device that you're trying to speak to, or do you care more about the person who owns the device? Now, I know that's a little bit of a blunt question, but it does really help to understand really what you're looking to achieve with your activities, as this is really going to help you inform your approach to identity resolution as a whole. And I say this because if you're looking to just identify a device, maybe you're looking to serve that device advertising content, and I'm thinking sort of DMP kind of thing here. Working at a device level is absolutely fine because you're trying to just engage someone with an advert to click through and start a conversation. And the big thing here then, so when we start to look at things like the identity graphs, is that using something that's leveraging probabilistic matching is really going to allow you to gain that reach that you want to have if you're looking to go down that device-led approach. Whereas if you're being more person-focused with your activities, you want to be able to have a conversation with each and every one of those customers, every one of those prospects. You want to be able to use everything you know about them, all of the different channels, all of the different permissions that they have. And this is where that first-party data and that deterministic approach is absolutely key. So we spent quite a lot of time talking about identity graphs as a whole, but person-focused organizations have really got options here as well. While we've covered identity graphs in a little bit of detail, the CDPs also have a role to play here in identity resolution. And I think realistically, when we're thinking about this, that if a truly deterministic identity graph is being created, and the CDP essentially is doing this for most businesses as well, it's leveraging all of the PII and a deterministic matching approach to remove all of the subjectivity and all of the error rates from the matching process in order to really create a true one-to-one verifiable match, which can be fully controlled by the marketer or the other users within the CDP interface as well. Beyond this is the actual robustness of the matching approach as well that the CDP is providing that has the ability to not only manage first-party data and all of that PII, but then be able to also manage second and third-party data as well, and do this ensuring all of the compliance and all of the traceability that you need around that, in line with those pieces of legislation I mentioned a little bit earlier. So this is all about making sure that the business isn't exposed to any undue risk associated with that initial or ongoing data collection, the usage, and like I said, the traceability of that data as well. So it's fair to say then that identity resolution really is something that all businesses need to manage on an ongoing basis. We as customers, we're always changing. We're only human, right? Whether that's in terms of our preferences, whether that's in terms of the devices we use, where we live, where we work. We can change our first names, our last names. The list of what's going to change about us is almost endless. And identity resolution is all about tracking and managing that change over time. But a quick word of warning here, though, is your identity resolution approach is only ever going to be as good as the weakest link in the chain, whether that's your approach to data collection and data permissioning, for example, whether that's a flaw potentially in the matching approaches that you're using, or the different tools that you're using to then leverage that data and manage that data as well. Like I said, it's always going to be the weakest link that's going to let you down. So being able to mitigate the risk and making sure that you've done all you can to remove any weaknesses in that chain is going to be really key to actually managing the data correctly. And then making sure that your customers' brand experience expectations are met or, where possible, absolutely exceeded as well. So really then, during today's session, we've had a look at the impact of identity resolution on the overall customer experience. we've explored the different types of data and the matching approaches that can be used to resolve identities. And then we've touched upon the different options that you have when you're looking to manage identity resolution. We've got identity graphs and CDPs. And these both provide different ways that businesses can look to manage that identity resolution. But one of the final things I want to really bring to the fore today is how a CDP and an identity graph can work together as well. And I say this as I want to really avoid any sort of misconception that there's a binary choice to be had. It's either one or the other. I've worked with a number of organisations that actually utilise both and do so very effectively as well. So in summary then, when we're thinking about this, the CDP is all about being able to better manage first-party data in that controllable, scalable, compliant way. And it's essentially building you that PII-driven, deterministically matched identity graph based upon your first-party data that you're collecting, while giving you options to easily add in or augment that data with second and third-party information where it's required as well. When we start to think about the more traditional identity graph, this is a great way to actually add a reach element to marketing activities as well. If you've got really limited first-party data sets for a smaller organisation looking to go on an acquisition of customers is kind of where you're going, then leveraging an identity graph alongside a CDP is a really powerful way of going about that as well. Because you're more focused, like I said, on the sort of the broader brush communications and sparking a conversation rather than that one-to-one engagement, which is what you would use the CDP for. So as we can see then, both solutions have a place, but as I said earlier, it's about matching approaches and system capabilities to business needs, and then really identifying the right mix for your organisation as well. But as we've touched upon already then, the future of identity resolution is absolutely changing as well. So third-party data, as I've already said, the use of third-party data is absolutely declining in response to regulation changes and move by players such as Google to remove that support for third-party cookies. But it's no surprise then that we've moved into an era of sort of true one-to-one marketing where businesses are really looking to strengthen their person-centric marketing capabilities. And it's that need really that's magnified the focus on identity and the outcomes it enables right across an organisation as well. So thank you very much for listening, everyone, and I'm just going to quickly pass you back over to Jen.
Thanks very much, Matt, and thanks very much everyone for joining us. So before we pop off, I do just want to mention that we recently ran a pop-up online conference called Join Digital. Some of you may have joined us. We ran it every single Wednesday for several weeks. I think it was about 4 weeks in a row. So we have loads and loads of content that we obviously created from running this conference. So I've uploaded some of those videos onto BrightTalk. So if you'd like to check out any of the sessions, then just head to our BrightTalk channel and you should be able to see them quite easily on the screen. So we covered some topics like next best action. We talked about the top 10 FAQs of custom data platforms. We also did a session on custom data transformation and obviously several more. So you might find that interesting. But thanks again for joining us, and thanks, Matt. And if you have any questions, obviously feel free to contact us. I've left our URL on the screen, and so if you want to check out any of our ebooks or anything like that, you can head over to our site and check them out. Okay then, thanks very much. That's all from us. Bye bye.